I had no idea the British press was so bigoted.
This one's wife. The Meghan Markle backlash. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Yes, I've said her name as a consequence of it belonging to the title of an article that I wanted to share with you, because it helps you understand why there continues to be people that support this one's wife and how they simply do not understand what she is. The article that I'm going to take you to not only fails to understand why people dislike this one's wife, but it once again seeks to apportion the blame for disliking her on you, the public, because you are essentially envious and racist, that this makes you online trolls. It completely fails to recognise any culpability on the part of this one's wife, and articles such as this are dangerous, because whilst it might be said that everybody is entitled to an opinion with regard to why this one's wife is disliked, it is written from somebody that attempts to hold a position of authority, because the author of the article is a lady called Shamin Ajan, and she's a licensed psychotherapist in New York City, specializing in intimacy and relationships. Moreover, her article has appeared in Psychology Today, and therefore, if there's a possibility that certain supporters of this one's wife happened upon this article, they would think that it provides authority to the propositions that are contained within it, when in actual fact, the material is wholly incorrect. As I stated, whilst there may be some substance in the opinion that is advanced, the fact that it comes from a psychotherapist with letters after her name and in a publication headed Psychology Today is done in an attempt to provide it with authority, and this is dangerous. The article's headed "The Psychology Behind the Meghan Markle Backlash." This one's wife has once again found herself at the centre of a cultural firestorm, this time over her new lifestyle series. The level of vitriol aimed at her is striking. Now, pausing there, it is often the case with pieces such as this that they utilise pejorative language such as vitriol for the purposes of telling you what it is that people are doing with regard to her. Vitriol is described as bitter criticism or malice. Now, certainly, from where I've been stood, the criticism has been simply that, criticism. And it's not been malicious. It's not been gratuitous. It's not been the case that people look and think, oh, I'm going to find fault with this come what may. The fact is that a multiplicity of people across social media and mainstream media all reached a similar conclusion. The cookery show isn't very good. It isn't the case that all of those people got together in a smoky room with tumblers of whiskey and went, let's all pick on the person of colour. Not at all. They all independently reached those conclusions. True, certain of them may have a bias against her to begin with, but many will have approached it in an objective fashion as reviewers. That is what they're there to do. But once again, we have somebody writing an article that suggests that it's vitriol. Why not just write criticism? But that doesn't fit with the narrative, does it? The author writes, the level of vitriol aimed at her is striking, but unfortunately not surprising. Now, pausing there, let us assume that it is vitriol, that it is bitter criticism and malicious. Might you be able to argue that actually it's not surprising after the way that she has behaved? After all, this is a woman who has told repeated lies. This is a woman that has ostracised her husband from his family and friends. This is a woman who has cut out her father and half-siblings from her life. This is a woman who has been demonstrably shown to use friends for her purposes and then cast them into the ether. This is a woman who has had repeated bullying allegations levelled against her in Australia, in the United Kingdom, and in the United States. It isn't the case that people thought, do you know what, let's just pick on her, and hey, we'll pick on her because she's a person of colour. The reason is that people dislike her is, as I've said so many times, because of her behaviour. And if that behaviour was actual vitriol, there is a sustainable argument that, well, is it any wonder that people are vitriolic? Most aren't, but if they are, is it any wonder? Many people were disgusted by the way that she behaved towards the late Duke of Edinburgh and Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II. Many people were disgusted at that curtsy. People were disgusted by the stolen valour moment at the Dusseldorf Invictus Games. People are sick and tired of her always staring down the camera lens, getting in the way, making herself the centre of attention, making out that she's important. Therefore, it's not like you have an entirely innocent individual that's attracting criticism which is entirely unjustified. There is a mountain of evidence that supports, first of all, legitimate criticism and could even potentially support vitriolic criticism of her. But an author such as this woman fails to acknowledge this evidence, again, because it's inconvenient to the narrative that she wishes to push. She continues by stating, the reaction to her show highlights deeper psychological and societal issues. In other words, let's blame shift. Let's blame you, the audience. Our obsession with placing celebrities on a pedestal, only to revel in their downfall. The dark side of online trolling, the insidious influence of racial biases, and the ever-present sting of envy. Our culture loves to elevate public figures, only to take pleasure in their downfall. Well, I'm not so sure that's entirely correct. There are people who love to see people succeeding and being built up, and they're dismayed when they make a misstep. It is true that there are people that revel in the downfall of public figures, but not necessarily having elevated them first. There are many people that have no time for the reality television, famous just for being famous type of individual, and in the circumstances never elevated them to begin with, but are quite pleased to watch their downfall because they didn't believe that their elevation by other people was justified in the first place. But a sweeping statement to suggest that our culture loves to elevate public figures only to take pleasure in their downfall paints a picture which is not entirely accurate. This One's Wife's journey from actress to duchess to one of the most scrutinised women in modern history is a prime example. This shift, sometimes called the pedestal effect, occurs when admiration turns to resentment the moment a public figure stops conforming to expectations. Now, pausing there, I don't think that This One's Wife was ever placed on a pedestal. She was welcomed. There were people that thought she could be a breath of fresh air in the royal family. It's interesting. She's a divorcee, she's American, and we're told that she's a person of colour also. I hadn't realised that, and that makes another interesting aspect to it all. Well, good for her and good for Harry. We hope they're very happy together. That was the general prevailing view of people. People didn't look and go, oh my goodness, she's amazing, what a superstar. Gosh, she's so fantastic. She's going to change the royal family. She's going to be absolutely brilliant. She's going to bring peace and succour to those that she moves amongst. They simply welcomed her. I doubt that anybody had any particular expectation about This One's Wife other than she would embrace the clear opportunity that she had to make a difference to the world through the royal family, and that she would utilise that platform. As we know, it turned out differently. But I really don't think that people elevated her to begin with, or if they did, they weren't large in number. The author continues by explaining this phenomenon is often rooted in our insecurities. Seeing someone seemingly have it all can trigger feelings of inadequacy or envy. Again, I don't think that's accurate. I don't think many people who are detractors of this one's wife looked at her and thought, I wish I was you. I think most people would look and think, you're fortunate to be in the royal family, but I wouldn't trade places with you because I wouldn't have to be in a position of being in such a goldfish bowl. I wouldn't want to have to engage in the service that's expected of you. Yes, I get to live in palaces and I have servants and I'm wealthy, all of that. I don't have to worry about any bills and so forth. But I've kind of become public property, haven't I? I can't do the things that I once did without a news crew following me around. I have to be careful as to what I say. I have to follow protocols. So there is a trade-off for all of that privilege. Furthermore, it's often stated by this one's wife supporters when they incorrectly use the word jealousy when they mean envy, that people are envious of the fact that she married Prince Harry. I think most people would say, I wouldn't be interested in him. I don't want to marry him because I don't want to join the royal family, and I'm not interested in him as an individual. Yet this is trotted out time and time again, and it's stated here. It's blame shifting, trying to suggest that you are inadequate. You feel inadequate because you see this one's wife marrying into the royal family. Or that you're envious of the life that she's got, when actually, again, based on actual evidence, there's plenty to suggest that why would you be envious of that? She continues by stating, when they stumble or defy expectations, tearing them down becomes a way to reclaim a sense of control. It isn't about her defying expectations. It's about the fact that the way that she has behaved, people simply don't like it. They have a sense of appropriateness. They have a sense of decency, a moral compass. They don't like the way that they have behaved. It isn't because she's defied expectations, it's because she's misbehaved, and therefore they criticise her. She continues, does it make us feel better? It may provide a momentary high, but it reinforces negative thought patterns and deepens social divisions. Social media has amplified this cycle, providing a platform where people feel emboldened to say things they would never say in person. Well, that much is true. The anonymity of the internet fosters a false sense of power and detachment from consequences. That also is true. Fueling a culture of relentless online bullying, particularly against high-profile women. Here we have the conflation of criticism into bullying. Criticism is not bullying. Legitimate observations about somebody's behaviour and highlighting that is not bullying. Making criticisms which have no foundation is bullying. Relentlessly making the same point over and over again against somebody is bullying. But yet again, people who are, of course, allowed to express an opinion, and remember, when you're a public figure, it's part of the contract with the audience, with the public, that I benefit by being famous. That allows me to make money, to enjoy the trappings of fame. But it also means that I am going to face some criticism because I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea. And if you put yourself out there publicly, you have to take the good with the bad. That doesn't mean that you have to tolerate stalkers or people threatening your life. That's ridiculous. But expect that some people will say, I don't like you. I don't approve of your behaviour. And most people would say, well, you're entitled to your view, and then think to themselves, I don't care, I'm the famous and rich one, so it doesn't matter. Not everybody can like me. Of course, with this one's wife as a narcissist who thinks that everybody should like her, anybody simply saying, I don't like you because of the way you behave, is a threat to control, and then goes through her distortion field, causing her to then state, well, this person is actually a hater. But once again, you have an author which fails to recognise that there is a space for legitimate online criticism of individuals, and it's not bullying. She states, you might hesitate to call it bullying, but let's be clear, trolling is cyberbullying. Okay, well, we can agree that trolling is cyberbullying, but criticism, that isn't cyberbullying, and again, this author misses this point. Hate-fueled comment sections. Again, notice the use of hate. Not criticism-fueled comment sections, not legitimate observation-fueled comment sections, but hate-fuel and targeted harassment are not just unpleasant, they have real psychological consequences, increasing anxiety, depression, and even PTSD-like symptoms. Now, I'm not suggesting that the comment sections are devoid of hate or that there aren't individuals that engage in targeted harassment. It exists. But one would expect that if you're approaching this from a supposed position of authority, you would recognize that it is just a small number that engage in this behavior, and the vast majority of comment sections are filled with people expressing themselves as they are entitled to do so, and that they are doing so on a legitimate basis. That they're doing so based upon what they have seen. They're doing so based on the evidence. Indeed, I think it would be interesting if some kind of research outfit looked at the below-the-line comments or across social media and divided it up into out-and-out hatred, comments that are based upon nothing but blind hatred, and comments which can be seen to be appropriate criticism. There'd be a blurring of the line between those two categories because you have to make a judgment call. But ultimately, you would be able to do it. And I would say that the percentage of legitimate criticism based upon evidence is far higher than the out-and-out hate. But this is a distinction that authors such as this one repeatedly fail to make. She continues by stating, and those for engaging in the bullying, research suggests it is often a projection of their own insecurities. They may be able to hide behind a screen when making harsh comments, but they cannot hide from their own inner critic. An insidious layer of the backlash against this one's wife is racism. Here it is again. Racism brought up as a suggestion that that's all it actually is. And once again, completely missing what it truly is, her behaviour. She then goes on to state, many have been conditioned to believe there is only one acceptable way to exist as a person of black ancestry, and those who do not fit that mould, whether in speech, choices, relationships or lifestyle, often face suspicion or hostility. Once again, this author fails to recognise that 1, most people don't see this one's wife as black, not because they're being racist, but because she has sought to erase her black features. She has presented herself as white, and her resume is that she's only dated and been married to white men, that she largely has white friends, and therefore a casual observer could readily be forgiven for thinking that she is white, because she behaves that way, and that she portrays herself that way. Therefore, how can you be racist towards someone who you thought was white? Again, authors such as this completely miss that factor because it's inconvenient to their argument. She continues by stating this form of racial gatekeeping is not new, but in this one's wife's case it is particularly jarring. Her biracial identity, wealth and proximity to royalty make her an easy target for those who consciously or unconsciously see success and privilege as belonging to a select few. The discomfort surrounding her presence in these spaces is not just personal, it is cultural conditioning at work. This thinking also fuels internalized racism. Jan A. Steele, a scholar and leader in multicultural mental health, describes two sides of this. A sense of racial superiority upholds white-centered values as the gold standard for success and behavior, while reactions against mainstream expectations lead some black individuals to harshly judge themselves and others for not conforming to black stereotypes. This creates a no-win situation for black people or those of mixed black heritage. Too polished and they are accused of assimilating, too authentic and they are labelled as reinforcing stereotypes. That is all fair comment. This one's wife, like many others, challenges the rigid definitions of blackness imposed by both white and black communities, but she doesn't. That is an error to suggest that she does. She doesn't challenge the rigid definitions of blackness because she's always embraced her white side and has portrayed herself as being white. She states this reality continues to fuel much of the hostility towards her. No, it doesn't. It is invariably the case that authors such as this love to make it about race when, in fact, it's not. And of course, if you then say, no, it's not to do with her race, it's to do with her behaviour, they will say you're in denial because you're racist, and therefore, from their perspective, you can't win. But what we can see is there is plenty of material that is based on her behaviour, which is nothing to do with her ethnicity. It's nothing to do with her blackness or whiteness. It's to do with this. She is a narcissist. There are white narcissists and black narcissists and female narcissists and male narcissists and transgender narcissists. There are old narcissists and young narcissists, American narcissists and British narcissists and German narcissists and Norwegian narcissists and Australian narcissists. There are narcissists in Japan and Thailand and India and Burma. The fact is, it's got nothing to do with her race and everything to do with her narcissism. And you would expect that a psychotherapist might actually recognise that would be the case and talk about or write about that instead. She continues by explaining, at its core, much of the backlash against this one's wife seems rooted in envy. Yes, that trite argument. Not necessarily the obvious, I want to be a princess kind, but a deeper envy of someone who appears to have crafted a life on her own terms. Many of the loudest critics likely do not even realise that their disdain is a reflection of their unfulfilled desires. Now we get into the psychotherapist's claptrap. You don't realise that your disdain is a reflection of your unfulfilled desires. No, my disdain for her is because I don't like the way she treated the Queen. It's as simple as that. No, you're envious. I can assure you I'm absolutely not. No, you don't realise that it's nothing to do with the way that she treated the Queen. It's to do with the fact that you have unfulfilled desires. Fuck off. That is the thing about envy. It rarely shows up as admiration. Instead, it often disguises itself as judgment. She's fake, which is true because she's a narcissist. She's self-absorbed, which is true because she's a narcissist. She's unrelatable, which is true because she's a narcissist that lacks emotional empathy. These are easy criticisms to hurl at someone who seems happy, successful, and unapologetic in her choices. No, they're easy criticisms to make because she's a narcissist. But she states, but here is the truth, your envy is showing. No, it's not. What's showing is an ability based upon my expertise, which I've shared with many other people, to recognise a narcissist. It's not envy of what she is. Believe me, from my own perspective, I don't envy any aspect of this one's wife. My life is far superior to hers in a multitude of ways. No one is above this emotion. She writes, I felt a tinge of envy myself. She has my estate and my garden in my dream town. But instead of letting that feeling curdle into resentment, I let it teach me something about my own desires and budget. Envy can be a guide if we allow it. It can reveal what we truly want rather than becoming a reason to tear others down. When we feel triggered by someone else's success, lifestyle, or confidence, it is worth pausing to ask why. Tearing others down will not bring us any closer to what we truly want. It only deepens our dissatisfaction. Instead of letting envy turn into resentment, we can use it as a tool for self-reflection. What if, instead of criticising, we allow ourselves to be inspired? After all, I actually like this one's wife's new show. I find it refreshing. I appreciate how she presents simple, engaging lifestyle ideas in a beautifully shot, visually relaxing format. Well, author, you are allowed to like her programme. Just in the way that plenty of other people are allowed not to like it. But notice the difference. When people express a view that they don't like it, you automatically state that their reason for not liking it is 1, the pedestal effect, 2, the dark side of online anonymity, 3, the racism factor, and 4, envy. Yet, let us analyse, why do you like it? Do you like it genuinely? Or are you liking it because you, as a black woman, feel that you ought to support this one's wife? Perhaps you have your own unconscious bias, which causes you to be naturally defensive in relation to this one's wife and ignore the actual evidence of poor behaviour and her narcissism that causes you to write articles like this, which protects her and blame shifts onto the audience. Something to think about, perhaps. She stated, if that's not your thing, that's fine. The beauty of media is that we can choose what we consume, but tearing something or someone down just because we do not like it, that says more about us than it does about her. Yet again, criticism is not tearing someone down. Not every piece of entertainment is for everyone, and thoughtful criticism is valuable, but there is a difference between constructive critique and the gleeful destruction of someone else's work and character. I'll say again, there are individuals out there that do revel in the gleeful destruction of what this one's wife does. You'll have seen them. There's one fairly prominent individual on X who comments about this one's wife multiple times a day, and it's basically ad hominem insults. And you really have to question the mentality of that individual in so doing. But for the vast majority of individuals, it's considered criticism based upon their opinion formed upon looking at the evidence. It isn't gratuitous, but like many of those that seek to defend this one's wife, they conflate the criticism with the hatred. The hatred is there, I wouldn't deny that, but it is but a small piece. And instead, when it's a little bit like the similar thing where if you express a view that goes against that of the government, you're far right in the United Kingdom. Or if you express a view that you've got concerns about immigration, that makes you far right. It's similar behaviour, whereby the supporters of this one's wife, if you criticise her, no matter how valid your criticism is, no matter how legitimate it is and how much it's based on the evidence, the fact is, you're criticising her, that makes you a hater. You're engaging in vitriol. You're tearing her down, when it's none of those things. And unfortunately, Shamin Ajan, with her article, which I've ruthlessly and constructively taken apart, not in a gratuitous fashion, but in a considered manner, demonstrates yet again that there are those that simply continue to trot out a narrative in relation to this one's wife, which is not based on the evidence, and that they would do far better to understand she is a narcissist, and that's why people don't like her, because of the behaviour of this particular narcissist. I'm HG Tudor. Thank you for listening.